Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is the Not So Serious Keto video podcast. Actually, this one might be better called like the Attention Deficit Disorder podcast, because all of the topics I have here are pretty brief, and not very many of them are actually related to keto. I want to start out, though, with a little bit of a cautionary tale, though, which is just how much all of these different online services, from Amazon to YouTube to Google, it's pretty obvious. Well, I mean, it's very obvious that they track everything that we do, everything we look at. In fact, I think even as I'm scrolling through something like my Facebook feed, even if I don't click on an article, I think if I pause long enough on it, it remembers that and says, oh, Steve wants to see more of these. And there are two examples of this from just the past couple of days. The first, completely not keto. Terry and I were watching on YouTube, it was like 70s cartoons, intros to 70s cartoons, like a half hour long. And a lot of that was fun. I remember watching a lot of those, and I remember especially that I really could not stand anything from Sid and Marty Krofft. I think those were all on NBC, like Sigmund and the Sea Monsters and H.R. Pufnstuf, I think was what it was called. But everything from Sid and Marty Krofft was pretty much like a stoner fever dream. However, after that, it said, oh, look, you're looking at stuff from the 70s. How would you like to see this video of Sean Cassidy singing "Do Run Run," which Terry wanted to watch, so we did. And now my YouTube recommendation list is pretty much every other video Sean Cassidy from the 70s. But now here's sort of the keto example, or especially not keto example, depending on your perspective. But I had been looking at gel packs for running. So I've got my 10K, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. I am less than 2 weeks away from running my first 10K race. And I was looking at some gel packs, just, saying, all right, this is going to be my carbs for the day. I'm going to have one of these gel packs before I go out and run and, try it out for a couple of weeks before the actual race. And I've been doing that. And, they basically taste kind of like jam is kind of what it is, like sort of a mixed fruit jam. And I think it's 24 grams of carbs in a packet. And that's pretty much my carbs for the day then. And I'm pretty much carnivore for the rest of the day on the days that I run. But apparently it thought I'm interested in something like this, or I want it taken up to the next level. And let me grab my phone here and I'll show you what they recommended to me today. This Scratch Labs Super High Carb Drink Mix. There is 100 grams of carbohydrates per serving in this stuff. I can't even fathom putting that much sugar into my body in one sitting. And the price on it, about $4 per serving. And the thing is, now I know that I looked at it, it's going to start showing up. I'm going to get all sort of high carb things starting to show up probably in my Amazon recommended list. So with that high carb drink mix out of the way, I'm going to talk about something we've talked about the last couple of weeks, which is food combos and crazy food combos, or seemingly crazy food combos that many of you swear by. And as I mentioned last week, the most popular ones seem to have been some combination of peanut butter and mayonnaise. And I decided to check through some of my food pairing cookbooks, and I've got 3 of them right down here. I'll show them and kind of give you my recommendations in case you're curious, to see if any of them said anything that would lead me to believe that peanut butter and mayo is a good idea. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm still going to try it. I'm just working up the courage. So the first book is The Art and Science of Food Pairing. This one, you've got to be really, really into science, I think, to get into it. It is a textbook, and so many of the pictures in it, or infographics, or whatever you want to call them, are just, I haven't developed the skill yet to interpret them. It's almost like reading hieroglyphics, or it reminds me a little bit of my days back in corporate America when IT people especially, they tended to be more guilty of this than anybody else, would put together a slide with so much on it that it was just incomprehensible. You're like, what do you mean? Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. And looking at some of the stuff in this book especially, I don't want to say it's culinarily snobbish, but just based on some of the things that you see in here, like what are some food combinations that go with baked rabbit? That's not a question that I normally have. The next one that's a little bit more accessible is the Flavor Matrix. And this is pretty cool because it's got a combination of recipes. Well, first it will talk about some unique food pairing ideas, like unique ingredients that maybe you didn't think go together, and then it'll have some recipe for it. Like, for example, this one I'm looking at right now is spice roasted grapes. Like, who would think of that? And it looks like it's maybe on top of some whipped feta or something. That actually sounds kind of yummy. But in this, it takes a number of different ingredients, and it'll look at the best pairings or surprise pairings or substitutes that you can use for a given ingredient. So I'm just going to try and find one real quick here that might be interesting. So like for poultry, it says one of the surprise pairings is banana. I would have never thought about putting banana with poultry, but some interesting ideas in this one. Now the book that's probably the most accessible, oops, almost slid out there, is the Flavor Bible by Karen Page and Andrew Dornenberg. And this one is predominantly text. I'm not sure if there may be some little recipes in here, but lots of quotes from chefs talking about combinations that they do. And this one actually had peanut butter in it. And the way this book works is if it's like a perfect combo, like something, a match made in heaven, it's in bold and capitalized. If it's just a solid companion, it's in bold, and then otherwise if it's just like potential companion or it kind of works, it's just regular text. So for peanut butter, one of the ones, not surprisingly, bananas. Another made in heaven sort of match, chocolate, especially dark and milk chocolate. I don't see bacon anywhere on the list, and I'm personally of the belief that bacon and peanut butter go together really well. I'd mentioned a couple of podcasts ago that one of my favorites as a child was peanut butter and ketchup, and although ketchup is not on the list, one of the things that is on the list, and it's not ketchup, even though I said ketchup 2 weeks ago, peanut butter and ketchup was one of my combos back as a child, both tomatoes and vinegar are on the list. So yeah, that kind of plays into ketchup. Mayo is not on the list, however, olive oil is. So I think there's an argument there that mayo and peanut butter could work, and I will likely try that out before the next podcast. Anyhow, if you're interested in any of these books, I will link to them down in the description below. You can find the Amazon link, and of course, once you look at it, then they'll start getting recommended to you all the time. For the second part of this podcast, it's all going to be pretty much rapid-fire topics. One of the questions I get almost weekly is, why don't you play guitar on one of your podcasts? The reason is, I haven't played guitar pretty much for about a year. I had a wart, I still kind of do, on my index finger. Imagine right where, if you were holding a needle, like you're doing some sewing with a needle, it would be right on your index finger where you're holding that needle, which also happens to be a place that gets a lot of contact when you're playing guitar, because this is my fretting hand right here. It's incredibly uncomfortable, and I've spent the better part of the last year trying to treat it, both at home and with a doctor's help. We've frozen it, we've applied Candida, he pronounced it, the doctor pronounced it Candida. At first I thought he said Canada. And I'm like, that seems odd that you're injecting that into my finger. But it causes it to blister up, and then it's supposed to help get rid of the wart. I think I'm about one treatment away. And then, provided my finger is better, I'm gonna have to do some practicing because I am way, way, way out of practice. Probably need to clean and restring most of my guitars as well. But at some point, yes, I will play something on one of the videos. I'm gonna have to figure out what to do though, because I don't want any sort of a music copyright strike. I mean, I guess maybe that's thinking too highly of myself. Like I can actually play something well enough that it's gonna say, oh, you're playing Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd or something. But that's coming at some point in the future, probably closer to winter is gonna be the time frame by the time I'm all healed and practiced up. So stay tuned. In a little family news update, my grandson Calvin is now walking, which is pretty exciting. It's clear that he loves it. He's having a lot of fun with it. He feels all grown up and stuff. But it requires an entirely new level of attention to danger for me. Well, I suppose any adult that's watching him, because he's fast and he seems to just hone in on whatever he can run into and pull down. I had mentioned a few podcasts ago that having a 1-year-old in the house is probably great training to become a Secret Service agent, because you need to be attentive constantly. I also think that maybe it would be good training for being a rodeo cowboy, especially the whole calf roping thing, you know, where they chase a calf and they rope it and they tie it and it's squirming and all of that. I mean, you get some of that when it comes to diaper changing, but if you really want to see how hard it is to control a 1-year-old, try wiping their nose sometime. They want none of that. One of the things I shared in my Serious Keto newsletter a couple of weeks ago was just how many apples we have. I planted 4 apple trees pre-keto, and that was definitely too many. And then Terry disagreed with me about whether or not we should be pruning the trees. After this year, she agrees we should be pruning the trees because we got so many apples. It's ridiculous. Just every single day, we're cooking some sort of apple thing, whether it's an apple bread or apple sauce or apple pie filling. But we've got an old style food mill, and so we're grinding that up. So basically, our kitchen has been converted essentially from being essentially my office or lab into now the applesauce factory. So basically now I'm kind of competing for the kitchen, and as a result there probably won't be any cooking recipe videos. They're probably going to be more simple things, dips, spreads, keto snacks, that sort of stuff for the next couple of weeks. And following up on the whole sort of updates theme in terms of the schedule and what's going on with me, there will not be a podcast next week. We're going on a little camping-ish sort of trip up into northern Wisconsin. So I'm going to do my best to get a few things recorded before we go so I can still release the videos, but the podcast isn't going to happen, which means the next podcast is actually going to drop, I think that would be the 15th. That will be the public release date. If you're a channel member, you'll probably get it a day sooner. But it will be right after I run my first ever 10K. I'd mentioned that earlier in the video. I'm kind of excited for that to be over. I'm getting tired of training for that. Running, I don't hate running, but I certainly don't love running. And my main hope is that in my age bracket, people are running the same speed that they ran last year. Because right now I'm on a pace where I can do between 6 and 7 miles at a pace that would win the 10K in my age bracket if it's still the same as it was last year. So while I'm not excited about getting up and running a few times a week, I am excited about the race. I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can do. I think it'll be a fun test to see how far I've come over the last couple of years. But that is going to be it for this podcast. A little bit different from my usual ones. Hopefully not too different. Hopefully you still enjoyed it, because I enjoy spending time with you every time we do these podcasts. I really love your comments. I love reading them. I love interacting with them. Well, interacting with you via the comments. So thanks for leaving comments, and thanks for watching.